We continue our look this morning at what China does not want you to see. The superpower is reclaiming land in 7 spots in the South China Sea.
Far out in the South China Sea, China is reshaping the ocean itself. Whole stretches of water are turning solid, and every new satellite image reveals outlines that shouldn't exist.
Satellite images from Moxa have revealed the presence of 2 Chinese H-6 bombers on a runway on Woody Island.
Nations nearby are alarmed, and for good reason. What's rising from these waters could shift borders, trade routes, and power itself.
And until a few months ago, it was a Chinese-controlled submerged reef. But now, as you can see, it's been transformed into a giant construction site.
No one expected the sea to disappear here, and even fewer expected what China would build in its place. Draining the South China Sea. Under the warm, shallow waters of the South China Sea, China began an engineering campaign unlike anything ever seen in the region. In the Spratly Islands, they picked out ring-shaped coral reefs and decided to turn parts of them into dry land. The biggest transformations happened at 3 reefs that now stand as symbols of this project: Mischief Reef, Subi Reef, and Fiery Cross Reef. Each one became a massive construction site visible even from space. At Mischief Reef, the new ground covered roughly 1,379 acres. Subi Reef came next, with about 976 acres, followed by Fiery Cross Reef at about 677 acres. Even smaller reefs, Quarterone, Gavin, Johnson South, and Hughes, saw their own mini makeovers. Together, the total new land reached about 3,200 acres, roughly 5 square miles, built during an intense burst of activity between late 2013 and 2016. The process started with holding the line, literally. Crews first built strong edges to keep the sea from washing away what they poured. These edges were made from seawalls and sloped rockwork known as revetments. Satellite photos from Subi Reef in mid-2015 showed long armored coastlines forming and, just as importantly, a narrow cut channel leading into the reef. That channel opened a path for boats to move in and out while the ground rose around them. The images even revealed 2 concrete batch plants along the western bank, proof that the builders were mixing and pouring non-stop. The main workhorses were the dredgers. These are giant ships capable of moving mountains of sand in record time. One key type, called a cutter suction dredger, has a steel mouth that grinds into the seabed. A spinning cutter head breaks up hard layers of coral and rock, while powerful pumps pull the sand and water mix through floating pipes. China's star machine in this category was the Tiankun Hao, often called the Magic Island Maker. It could dig down about 115 feet and move roughly 6,000 cubic yards of material every hour. Before this flagship came along, another ship, the Tianjing Hao, had already worked nearly 200 days straight across 5 reefs during the earlier stages of the Spratly buildup. These were industrial machines on the scale of small towns, and their output was staggering. A second type of dredger, called a trailing suction hopper dredger, acted like a giant vacuum. It sucked up loose sand from the ocean floor and stored it inside its hull before offloading the load to the construction site. No matter which type was used, the next step was the same: run the pipes. Long floating pipes carried the sandy slurry from the dredgers into the boxed-off area. Once there, the mixture spread out and the sand slowly settled while the water drained away through the rim or special outlets. With each layer added, the surface climbed higher until it broke through the waves and became dry. The pace was unbelievable. Using commercial satellite images, analysts tracked Subi Reef expanding by roughly 8 acres, about 6 football fields, per day during the height of construction in mid-2015. At Mischief Reef, the transformation was captured step by step. In early 2015, multiple dredgers worked along the edges and inside the lagoon. New channels appeared, and fleets of small craft gathered inside a man-made inner harbor. By the end of the year, areas that were once bright blue water turned tan and solid with long, straight shorelines. Even the smaller jobs were enormous by normal island standards. Quarteron's 56 acres might not sound huge, but that is nearly 1/10 of a square mile. Enough space for warehouses, tanks, and buildings. Gavin's 34 acres and Johnson South's 27 acres became strong pads where waves used to crash over coral. Hughes Reef at 19 acres may have been the smallest, but that is still roughly 14 football fields of new ground where none existed before. The reef's natural shapes helped make this possible. A ring-shaped coral reef already forms a kind of bowl, a raised rim with a calmer lagoon inside. Because the water inside is shallow and protected, it was ideal for heavy dredging. The rim shielded workers from strong waves, while the inner lagoon gave them calm water for boats and pipes. Once the rim was armored and the channel opened, they could fill the inside safely. That is why Mischief, Subi, and Fiery Cross all share the same circular pattern. The water was gone, the sand was in place. Now came the question of what China would build on this brand new land. What China built on the new islands. On the new man-made islands of the Spratlys, China transformed blank sand into something permanent, solid operational bases made of concrete and steel. Across Fiery Cross, Mischief, and Subi reefs, runways now stretch across the surface, aircraft shelters line the edges, radars turn inside white domes, and harbors with hard walls open into the lagoons. These are no longer raw piles of fill. They are working military installations that can support planes, ships, and the people who run them. Let's start with the runways. Each of the three major reefs now holds a strip about 3,000 meters long, roughly 10,000 feet, which is long enough for anything from small fighters to large transport aircraft. In early 2016, planes were already landing on Fiery Cross Reef for medical evacuations. Soon after, similar flights took place on Subi and Mischief as well, confirming all three bases were active. Right beside the runways sit rows of aircraft shelters. By early 2017, satellite images showed each of the main reefs equipped with hardened hangars for around 24 fighter-sized aircraft, plus larger bays for transport and patrol planes. Add them up, and the big three together hold roughly 72 fighter shelters and about a dozen big plane bays. The shelters themselves aren't light metal sheds. They're thick-walled, concrete-roofed structures built to take damage. On top of that, analysts noticed other hardened buildings with sliding roofs, the kind used to hide and deploy mobile missile launchers. The sliding tops allow the crew to roll a launcher out or even fire from within the shelter, then seal it back up. These began appearing in 2017 and were soon spotted at all three major outposts. They stand beside shorter gun or missile sites designed for local air defense. The same pattern repeats at Fiery Cross, Subi, and Mischief. One more sign that all three share a single blueprint. Every base needs eyes and ears, and in these outposts, they rise above the rooftops. At Subi Reef, analysts identified a full ring of tall masts forming what's believed to be a high-frequency array, often nicknamed an elephant cage. That type of setup can be used for long-range signal tracking and direction finding. Around the runways and coastlines stand towers packed with antennas and dishes, each one part of a network designed to monitor both the air and the sea around the clock. White domes, called radomes, cover radar dishes to protect them from wind, heat, and salt spray. The airfields alone wouldn't mean much without harbors, and those are just as visible. At Mischief and Subi reefs, there are clear cuts through the reef rims leading into inner basins, wide, calm water lined with straight quay walls. Ships can enter through the cut, dock inside the lagoon, unload, and turn around before heading back out. These aren't makeshift ramps. They're structured ports with deep access channels, turning circles, and paved loading yards. The systems that keep these islands running look a lot like what you'd find in a small industrial town. Big round tanks hold fuel. Low box-shaped buildings nearby contain generators and repair shops. Analysts from Johns Hopkins noted that both Subi and Mischief reefs have visible diesel power plants, with space left to add more. That means each base can make its own electricity to power radars, lights, pumps, and living quarters, even if the weather turns bad or the connection to the mainland goes down. Inside the fences, rows of matching buildings line straight roads. They look like housing blocks, offices, or workshops, mixed with parking yards and water tanks. Review of satellite images showed not just the obvious buildings but also hardened missile shelters and possible underground rooms. Digging into coral isn't done for looks, it's for protection. In 2018, China added a softer touch. New weather stations were built on Fiery Cross, Subi, and Mischief reefs. They collect data and send forecasts, a small public layer sitting on top of a very military setup. Zoom out on a map and the layout makes more sense. Fiery Cross sits on the southwest edge of the Spratlys, Subi is toward the northwest, and Mischief lies to the northeast. Connect those 3 points, and you get a wide triangle covering the heart of the South China Sea, right where major shipping lanes, fishing grounds, and smaller reefs sit. With airfields, harbors, and radars at all 3 corners, aircraft and ships can rotate between them, refuel, and maintain an unbroken presence over the region. A Japanese defense report in 2025 confirmed this, showing how the Big Three now link up with other Chinese facilities farther north to form a single chain, and all. That new land sits where coral once grew. The next part of the story dives beneath the surface to see what changed underwater, what was lost, what survived, and what scars remain. The price the ocean paid. Under clear water, reefs look like cities, bright, crowded, and alive. When the bottom is dug up and tons of sand are dumped in, the water turns thick and brown. The silt rubs coral like sandpaper, blocks sunlight, and then settles on top of living rock. That is what happened across key reefs in the Spratly Islands when land rose where shallow water used to be, and the damage did not stop at the edge of the new shore. Satellite teams tracking the water around these builds saw the sea itself change color in wide rings around the works, a sign that fine particles were spreading far beyond the new sand. One peer-reviewed study that followed Mischief Reef through and after the heavy work found that the muddy plume reached out to about 12 miles from the reef on average, covering more than 460 square miles of ocean over the dredging period. It then faded within roughly 2 days as the silt sank, only to be replaced by the next pulse of mud from the pumps. Even after the dredging slowed, signs of stress lingered in the lagoon. Light bouncing back from the water stayed high, meaning more particles were suspended, while chlorophyll, an indicator of tiny plant life, fell below earlier levels, a hint that the base of the food web had been smothered under the new layer. The brown clouds were not just big, they were constant while the work was at its peak. Another satellite study mapped the dirty water at Mischief, Subi, and Fiery Cross, and found that plume-affected water appeared again and again across the 3 sites during 2 years of rapid land growth. Satellite images showed that the area marked as plume covered well over 1,000 square miles around the 3 main sites. A 2023 analysis led by the Asia Maritime Transparency Initiative, AMTI, found that more than 6,200 acres of coral had been destroyed in the South China Sea, and about 3/4 of that came from China's projects alone. By 2025, AMTI's updated count put China's total since 2013 at roughly 4,648 acres, or about 7 square miles, and noted that fresh losses had continued into 2024 from other claimants. The exact numbers change depending on how and when you measure them. The new coastlines also change the natural rhythm of the sea. Breakwaters, ring walls, and causeways don't just hold back waves, they bend the tide. Studies of other coastal bays show that when man-made islands or roads block open water, the currents slow down, and pollution and nutrients build up near the entrances. Nitrate levels rise, the water lingers longer, and the sea's natural flushing weakens. The same physics apply here. When lagoons are cut and reshaped for inner harbors, water moves in and out more slowly, fine silt stays suspended inside, and less sunlight reaches the coral and seagrass on the bottom. But dredging wasn't the only thing tearing the reefs apart. A second wound came from cutter boats hunting giant clams. These boats spin their propellers into the reef surface to break the shells loose, shredding coral and leaving long white scars you can spot even from orbit. Scientists have mapped those scars across the Spratlys and Paracels. AMTI's 2023 survey estimated the Chinese clam boats alone damaged over 16,300 acres of coral, about 26 square miles. Earlier regional studies found the total damage from all fleets topping 40 square miles. Once coral is buried, scraped, or broken into loose chunks, it doesn't bounce back quickly. Young coral needs clean, solid ground to attach to, but rubble shifts with every wave, and dust keeps washing over it. Global studies on dredging show the same pattern again and again: slower growth, fewer baby corals surviving, higher disease, and painfully slow recovery. Fish felt the effects immediately. The Spratly Reef System isn't just a patch of coral. It's a nursery for baby fish that later drift to the coasts. U.S. marine research over decades shows that when you smother or strip a reef, the small fish disappear first. Their hiding places vanish under sand or rubble, leaving open water for predators and no protection for the young. That means fewer adult fish later, fewer groupers, wrasses, and other valuable species, and fewer larvae carried by the currents to restock coastal grounds. It's one more hit on fish stocks that experts already call overfished. The damage under the waves was already done. What followed was the struggle above them, in courtrooms and on open water. The global clash over the South China Sea. On July 12, 2016, an international tribunal in The Hague delivered a landmark ruling on the South China Sea. It rejected China's sweeping 9-line claim, a boundary that Beijing draws on its maps with 9 curved dashes, enclosing almost the entire sea as its own. The court said that the line had no legal basis under the international law of the sea. The court also decided that many of the Spratly reefs were not true islands, meaning they could not generate wide exclusive zones. It further found that China had violated the Philippines' rights within its own waters. Beijing rejected the decision, but the ruling did not disappear. It became the legal baseline that has quietly shaped every move since. After that verdict, the South China Sea turned into a test of actions instead of words. Warships, coast guards, and large fishing fleets from several countries began enforcing their claims through real encounters. The United States responded with regular freedom of navigation patrols. On May 10, 2024, for example, the destroyer USS Halsey sailed near the Paracel Islands to challenge what Washington called excessive maritime claims. China said its forces drove away the ship. The U.S. said it simply exercised legal rights and kept going. These encounters now happen so often they've become routine, a live version of the legal argument playing out at sea. The sharpest flashpoints since 2023 have centered on the rusting hulk of the BRP Sierra Madre, a Philippine ship deliberately grounded on 2nd Thomas Shoal in 1999 to hold that reef. A few Marines live aboard it, supplied by small wooden boats that bring food, water, and fuel from Palawan. China tries to block those runs. On October 22, 2023, Philippine officials said a China Coast Guard vessel rammed one of their Coast Guard ships and struck a small resupply boat. Beijing said the Philippines caused the collision. In March 2024, 2 more clashes followed. On March 5th, a Chinese and a Philippine Coast Guard ship collided again near the same shoal, injuring 4 Filipinos. Then, on March 23rd, Chinese ships blasted a Philippine supply boat with high-pressure water from point-blank range. The wooden hull cracked, the bridge windows shattered into splinters of glass, and several crew members were hurt. These were not isolated scenes, but part of a continuing cycle of water cannon strikes, blocking maneuvers, and near collisions that kept the temperature rising through 2024. The clashes quickly drew a warning from Washington. U.S. officials reminded everyone that under the long-standing defense treaty with the Philippines, any armed attack on a Philippine government ship, including its Coast Guard, would be treated as an attack on the United States itself. That message was repeated through 2023, 2024, and again in 2025 as more confrontations flared making clear that if a Philippine vessel is struck, Washington is bound to respond. The confrontations grew more personal as well. In June 2024, a close-range clash near 2nd Thomas Shoal left a Philippine sailor badly injured when Chinese personnel boarded small Philippine boats and cut lines and gear, according to Manila. Beijing blamed the Philippines for provoking the fight. The U.S. condemned the boarding and again pointed to the Defense Pact. While tensions ran high in the Spratlys, construction continued farther north in the Paracel Islands. In August 2023, new satellite photos showed a straight, raised strip of land on Triton Island. Early headlines called it a runway, but closer inspection showed it was only about 600 meters long, roughly 1,970 feet, and about 50 feet wide. Analysts said it was too short for fighter jets but could host drones or light aircraft, and others suggested it might be a levee or a flood control wall. Whatever its purpose, it was another hard feature built on a strategically placed island. Then, in May 2025, China sent a different kind of signal from the same chain: bombers. Satellite shots showed H-6 bombers parked on Woody Island, China's main base in the Paracels. Their stay was brief, but it proved that long-range aircraft could stage from the island whenever Beijing wanted to show reach. The area often hosts U.S. and allied carrier groups, so any bomber sighting there draws instant attention. Meanwhile, others have been busy too. In the same South China Sea, Vietnam has been creating new land on the reefs it already holds in the Spratly Islands, expanding its outposts through 2023, 2024, and into 2025. Satellite studies show Vietnam adding hundreds of new acres across more than a dozen reefs, one of its biggest building drives yet. The push mirrors a wider pattern in the region: more dredging, more piers, and more patrols by several nations, each reinforcing its own claim. The competition that started years ago has only sped up. Another piece of the story is the maritime militia, big steel fishing boats that often move together in large packs. These ships look like regular fishing vessels, but many are part of China's state-backed fleet. In 2024, satellite trackers spotted record numbers of them across the South China Sea. Most stayed docked at China's new man-made islands instead of camping on empty reefs like before. But massive clusters still formed around spots such as Whitsun Reef, the same place that drew global headlines back in 2021. These swarms, often shadowed by Coast Guard ships, let China show strength at sea without sending its navy. There have also been reports of new patches of land forming near places like Eldad Reef since late 2022. Some satellite experts say fresh sandbars have appeared above the water. Chinese scientists deny it. Still, the steady stream of new work sightings adds to the sense that expansion hasn't stopped. It's just slower and quieter. Not every scene in the South China Sea is tense. Throughout 2024 and 2025, the United States and its allies kept sailing through the region together, carrying out drills and freedom of navigation runs. The U.S. Navy often announced when its destroyers passed near Chinese-claimed islands or through the Paracel chain to show that international waters remain open to everyone. Each time, China's military released its own statement saying it had warned off or expelled the ships. Leaders are trying to reduce the danger. For years, ASEAN and China have been working on a code of conduct to prevent accidents at sea. In 2024 and 2025, Southeast Asian nations again said they wanted an agreement, but admitted progress was slow. The main problems are deciding if the agreement would carry real legal weight or just be symbolic, and figuring out exactly which waters it would cover. Every new collision or water cannon strike only increases the pressure to get it done. Still, there has been a small step forward. In early November 2025, U.S. and Chinese defense chiefs agreed to reopen direct military phone lines for emergency calls. It doesn't solve any disputes, but it gives both sides a way to talk fast if something goes wrong. A safety valve to stop tense moments from spiraling out of control. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.